The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Saturdays or Sundays, SOR Media, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the expressed written consent of SOR Media is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised. Are you experienced? Then come own the night with us.
Little brother has taken control, shoveling dirt in every hole. Predators to condemn your soul, watching you and watching me. We're all
Station atop the mountains of British Columbia, live from SOR headquarters. This is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
We live behind glass curtains and act like nothing's wrong. Soon you will belong.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, and on Spaced Out Radio on iTunes. You can follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and on Instagram at Dave Scott SOR, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio.
Brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye with the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. Wait for you to fall. We will expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized.
It's Thursday, August 16th, Friday, August 17th, if you're on the East Coast or across the pond. And this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. Hope you had a great day and night. I am your host, Dave Scott, broadcasting to you live from the Great White North, on top of the very smoky mountains of central British Columbia, right here at SOR headquarters. We are 150,000 strong nightly on the SOR radio network and Deep Talk Radio, and we say hello to each and every one of you. If you want to take in our archives, they are free at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you. You can rock out to Bumblefoot, shop at our store, read up on the encounter online, and so much more. Hey, what are you doing September 28th through 30th? I think you should come north to British Columbia, where I am, for the first annual Caribou Paracon, brought to you by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. Go to questers.ca right now, questers.ca. Click on the fall conference and get your tickets today. Tonight's show is brought to you by the YouTube channel Ensuho. Sebastian Martin brings high-quality messages to the masses. Go to spacedoutradio.com, click on the Ensuho banner, and subscribe to the channel today. The third Thursday of every month, we bring in our resident alternative media expert, Jamie Sexton from Rebel Planet News, where we take a look at a couple of serious stories that have happened recently. Now, normally we don't really like to talk too much about other media outlets, but the firestorm caused by social media platforms like Facebook and YouTube regarding recently dismissed Alex Jones is something that really needs to be discussed. And with that raging debate as to whether or not this is a constitutional violation of freedom of speech, we will also be joined tonight by paranormal lawyer Michael W. Hall and representing the media from The Encounter, Everett Thiemer. We're also going to get into a training camp in New Mexico where alleged terrorists were training kids in the school or in the art of school shootings. How does this even happen in today's day and age with today's security? And then once again, The Encounter at the bottom of hour number 3, where we get into the weird, strange, and WTF news of the day. We introduce Jamie Sexton with the Rebel Planet. Jamie, thank you so much for coming back on, my friend. How you been doing?
I've been doing good. Good to be here.
I'm going to get you to turn your speaker down, my friend. We're getting a lot of feedback.
All right.
That would be wonderful.
There we go.
Good to have you back on, my friend. Hard to believe it's already been a month since you were on the show.
Yeah. Time flies.
Well, we're having fun, so why not, my friend? Why the heck not? Michael W. Hall, paranormal lawyer. How you been doing?
Hey, Dave, I'm doing really well. Surviving the smoke down here in the Seattle area. But I would imagine it's thick up with your place as well.
You know what? Visibility this morning when I went into town, and town is only about 8 miles away from me. Visibility when I was at the top of the hill coming down into town was maybe half a mile. Couldn't even see the mountains on the other side of town. And our town is small, man. It's cuddled up in a little valley. And usually you could see the mountain and the highway going up into the mountains to crawl on out of town. Couldn't even see the mountain today. It was terrible. This forest fire smoke is just horrific up here right now.
Yeah, it's affecting people's respiratory systems. You know, if you're an elderly person or have a respiratory problem, you better stay inside, at least get a mask on if you're going outside, because it's pretty awesome out there. But, you know, I suppose we'll survive, but it is kind of interesting.
For sure. And Everett Thiemer, you don't usually get an opportunity to join us for a full show, but because we were having a media panel today, I thought it would be important to have you in here from The Encounter Online, who is the Spaced Out Radio newsroom. So thank you so much for joining us as well.
Hey, thank you for having me. I forgot what the front of the show sounded like.
Yeah, I know. It's really weird sometimes. Gentlemen, we got a couple of important topics to talk about tonight, and this one just absolutely blew me away. In New Mexico, recently, out in the desert, in the middle of nowhere, there was an extremist Muslim group that was busted, and the heinous thing that they were doing was actually training kids to use weapons and prepare them for future school shootings. Jamie, I know New Mexico isn't too far away from your home in Texas. This is a little bit eerie that the country that is trying to stamp out terrorism all across the world is having it happen in their own backyard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's scary to think that you know, people are out there training people for school shootings. These people that had done that apparently have been cut loose on a signature bond, which is a really, in my opinion, a very careless thing to do, to let them out on such a light bond like that. You know, this, as far as I'm concerned, they're not really taking this seriously. From the optics of it so far, don't appear that the reaction is what it should be, in my opinion.
It is a little dangerous when you look at it because, I mean, this gentleman who set this camp up, Siraj Ibn Wahaj, 39 years old, he's the son of a Brooklyn imam, and, you know, who was named by prosecutors as an unindicted co-conspirator to the 93 World Trade Center bombing. This is heavy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
How do you let this guy walk on a signature bond? Yeah,
that's my, you know, I don't know. I watch a lot of the things that are going on in Europe and different parts of the West and different parts of the globe right now in relation to some of these radical groups, especially Islamic groups. And it just seems to me that there's a theme at play, which is very troubling, that, I don't want to, assert too much, but it seems to me there might be a little bit of, some passes given to the Islamic community in different cultures around the world for things that are going on, especially in relation to a lot of these mass immigrants that are coming in different parts of the world. So I hope that what we're seeing in New Mexico and the light slap on the hand, at least so far in this case, isn't akin to that. That would be very disturbing for that to be in the United States.
And the scene looked like a real third world country. I mean, the buildings were made up of cardboard and particle board, and the clothing that these kids were wearing from the age of 1 to 15, were tattered and torn, basically looking like a third world country. They had absolutely no food, no water, nothing. Everything was delivered in. And to train these children, I mean, how heinous is that this is happening, Jamie, under the watchful eye of, everybody in the United States, considering this is still, for almost 20 years now, a very sensitive topic.
Right. Well, the one player that you mentioned, I believe his name is Imam Siraj Wahaji, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. He should be, I don't understand why they don't have eyes on this guy nonstop. In fact, I don't even know why he's on our soil, to be honest with you. He's the son of one of the co-conspirators of the World Trade Center bombing in '93. He wasn't the active player. His father was, but still, I mean, obviously the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But if we're going to be serious about threats like this, how come we're not watching someone like that? And if anyone says, well, we can't just, that would be a violation of somebody's rights. Well, okay. I think the argument has been made that if you have an association with terrorists, whether it be, familial or whether it be just, an association, I think you should be watched, because in this case, as you can see, the fruits come out to bear, Yeah, and I saw the camp that you're speaking of. I mean, there could really only be one purpose for something like that. I mean, obviously they weren't digging in to stay there for a long period of time. My guess is, from the looks of the camp, that there were probably some short-term plans in training these kids to do what they needed to do, and then they were going to scoot and skedaddle from that camp.
Michael W. Hall, I want to bring you in here as a Washington state attorney and attorney in the United States for Spaced Out Radio. I think it's important to get a little bit of a look at the law in regards to this, because the United States has been very, very diligent in trying to stamp out a lot of this illegal immigration, a lot of terrorism on home soil ever since 9/11, and yet how does something like this fall through the cracks?
Yeah, that's a real good question. This seems to be so egregious that something should have leaked out well before this young person on the camp actually texted someone outside of the camp and told them that they were very hungry and were running out of food. You would think that, the local folks around that area, that they would have had to shop to get food, would have known something was going on, or even the local sheriff and law enforcement agencies in that area, they're pretty sharp folks out there when they're dealing with their own backyard in law enforcement. So it's kind of a lot of this doesn't make sense to me that they have, as it was noted, made this compound out in the middle of the desert, which is, big enough to be seen with plenty of aerial surveillance, and even satellite surveillance could pick this thing up. I know they do that, of course, at the borders, with drones and all that kind of stuff. So I'm wondering what the issues are here and why this thing has slipped through the cracks and now seems to be almost being swept under the rug as we look at it.
And it looks like, Michael, they even killed a child, 3 years old, because they thought the child was possessed by the devil. Yeah, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense either. I believe there's some facts in this report that we are missing, of course. I've heard disparaging remarks in the fact that this child maybe even had epilepsy and those kinds of medical issues and was not being treated correctly at the time. And then obviously they, went at the malady that he was having with some kind of a religious fervor instead of medical advice and help. So, I'm assuming that's why they are only at this point charging these folks with child abuse, which is very interesting choice of counts to be able to add to this kind of an egregious act. You would think that normally prosecutors would add quite a few accounts and maybe be willing to give up a few of them in negotiations, but not just start out with a very, not that it's a very minor a charge, but it is something that seems minor when you're dealing with a dead child. And Everett Themer, I want to bring you in here, checking out on the mainstream media on this story. When you look at a story like this, where you see the heinous crime, I mean, very, very easy to spot child abuse here. We got murder, we have terrorism, we have a little bit of everything. Why isn't the mainstream media eating this up like a dirty shirt as they would, say, against something like the president or Democrats versus Republicans? I mean, this is an important case in regards to national security down south and everybody in North America, for that matter.
It is, but I also think that being in the Southwest, it's not getting the attention because other than child abuse, we don't have any acts of terrorism. We don't have, I don't believe they've filed any weapons charges yet. There's nothing really sensational about this yet, other than that there was a camp and a child died and there's child abuse. If more charges get filed, if this grows a little bit through government charges and things like that, I think that other outlets will pick up on it a little bit more. But right now, it's not an exciting story. It's not something that's going to sell to most of the country.
I get that, but I mean, let's face it, if it bleeds, it leads. Okay, and there's something that really, really pisses off the public. Number one, when a child gets hurt or abused. Number two, the amount of school shootings that have happened in the United States the last 3 to 5 years, and this has nothing to do with gun control, but the amount of school shootings, now knowing that there is a terrorist bloc training for these types of events, and these children being indoctrinated that, if you die, you die. No big deal. That is sickening on the worst level. And usually, I don't know what it's like down there ever, but up here, if you involve children into a mainstream story or cult-like fashion, that is big news, man. And it just doesn't seem to be getting the play.
I think that sadly part of that problem is child abuse is stories about child abuse are so prevalent. There's so much child abuse out there. You can find stories local stories in every major newspaper about it almost daily. So I think in some ways the public is being desensitized to it. But I would be curious to see what the reaction would be if this camp had been discovered because one of the previous school shootings had a shooter that came out of it. Would the outcry be different than what it is right now?
Jamie, that's a good question that ever points to it. I mean, is the mainstream media covering this story up, or is there just not enough juice to make it flow?
Because the mainstream media works in concert, they all follow each other's talking points and usually follow a script and yada, yada, yada. There's probably some deciding formula to it. And my guess is that Everett's right in one sense, I believe, to point out that it doesn't lack sensationalism because nobody in this camp actually committed any terrorism. But for me, the alarming point is that I really do believe that it's become politically incorrect to go after anything Islamic. And I know I'm really putting myself out on the line with that statement. It's pretty bold, but I see it. I see it everywhere. And I don't think the news wants to touch it. It's become the new pariah. You don't want to. I don't know why those decisions are being made in certain cultures and certain news outlets or whatever, but you're not allowed to mention that they were Islamic. You're not, I think we all know what happened to Tommy Robinson over in the UK recently. There's just countless examples around the globe right now of really capitalizing and sensationalizing stories around Islamic groups and Islamic events, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if it's some politically correct maneuver or if it's something else at play. I really don't know, but I don't like the trend, and I agree with you, Dave, that it probably should be getting more airplay. It's alarming. It's alarming to think that there are radical sects out there that are first abusing children, first of all, starving them, letting them die, keeping them in camps in the desert with no food and water, but beyond that, training them to be terrorists. That's alarming. So, yeah, I think that we should, but again, like I said earlier, the news outlets work in concert. So if there was anything respectable in mainstream news anymore, they would work independently, and you would think that at least a few of them would be covering this, but they don't. As one goes, they all go. So.
And I want to correct this for just a second. When I say that they're not taking it seriously or not covering it, they are doing stories. So immediately the idea is, well, what can they do besides the stories? I guess what I'm looking at here is in the research that I did, when you have something big happen, let's just say hypothetically, Michael, Donald Trump. All right, Donald Trump, if he sneezes the wrong way, there is days and days of panels and experts on absolutely everything breaking down his sneeze. Antifa violence is the same way. All right, where people are just all over Antifa right now, who says they come in peace, but in the meantime, they're acting like a bunch of hooligans. We see a lot of that type of violence. Yet with something like this, and maybe I'm wrong. Okay, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not man enough to say that I'm right on this, but I just haven't seen it yet. I don't see the breakdowns of experts of having a terrorist camp being found on the news. I just don't see it. I see the stories, but we don't see the political experts breaking this down the way we saw things, say, with 9/11.
Yes, exactly. There is some important details that are missing off this entire story, which is kind of concerning when in reality, Jamie is correct that most of the mainstream media follows a formula, and they will mimic each other in these stories to stay safe or have their editors, think of something that they want to put out, but they don't want to get into the details for some reason. So this story to me seems to be one of those soft lob stories that they're actually putting it out there just to kind of get some readership, but they're not willing to get to the details of it for some reason. And that's kind of bothersome at this point. I might point out one issue in this story that is maybe not as glaring as some of the others, but as an attorney who was trained in the prosecutor's office and then went into private practice myself for the last 30 years and actually ran for Superior Court judge a few times myself, I've noted that the judge in this case, Sarah Backus, what came out of the public defender's office in this regard before she was appointed to the bench. Now, if you know anything about the whole system of how judges are appointed, initially what happens is one of the judges might retire early, so that allows the governor of the state to appoint someone to the bench who would have a leg up, of course, in running in the election for the traditional seat. And normally you would see a prosecutor being appointed to these positions because the prosecutor's bar in any county is usually the largest bar, as far as organized attorneys go. So it is kind of unusual that Sarah Backus was a public defender and got appointed to this position. And I'm not disparaging anyone in this case, but I'm just saying that judges have different points of view when they get into the courtroom. And a public defender who has been appointed to the bench would definitely have a little bit different point of view than a traditional prosecutor who is appointed to the bench.
Everett, on your coverage of the news here in regards to this story, are you seeing what maybe I'm not seeing up here in Canada in regards to, yes, the story is being covered, but no, we don't have these great panels of experts breaking it down for hours upon end?
No, you're right. It is being covered, but that's the extent of it. It's I don't want to say it's a footnote or a sidebar, but it isn't getting a lot of analysis. And something that Jamie had said that kind of made me think is, would this story be handled differently if this were a neo-Nazi type of group or some form of, I hate to use the word, but cult? If we took the Muslim or Islamic factor out of this and made it something else, would it be treated differently?
Jamie, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking along the same lines. If this had been, like Everett said, had it been some, I don't know, right-wing cult or some religious extreme, Christian extremist group or something like that. I mean, we all know what happened in Waco. I don't know. You just, you don't want to presume too much, but it is worth pondering, given today's culture and climate, how that would have played out differently. I just don't. I don't like that trend that I mentioned, or the thought of that trend that's going on in different parts of the world. And as I mentioned earlier, I really hope that this is not an indication that that's the way the American media is starting to behave as well, because it is definitely playing itself out that way in parts of Europe and other parts of the West. So that would be would be disturbing to me.
I'm going to throw in another story here, guys, and give the other side here, and I want to say thank you to Tim at Deep Talk Radio for passing this one over, because I think this is just as important in regards to, the way abuse of children is going on. But, I mean, in Pennsylvania, they have been taking a lot of heat in the Roman Catholic Church of Pennsylvania with child sex abuse as well. 300 priests over a 70-year period abusing children, more than 1,000 children at this time. I hate getting into this religious doctrine, okay, because there is a lot more good, in my opinion, than bad when it comes to any organized religion, even Catholics, even Muslims, or whomever it may be. But Jamie, when you look at the Catholic Church and the way in certain areas they have kind of ixnayed this topic and kind of pushed it to the ground, even though everybody from the mainstream to the alternative media to politicians continues to throw it in their face, how do they continue to get away with it?
Well, again, it seems I'm putting myself out on quite a limb this evening, but I got to speak my mind. I'm not as supportive as you are of organized religion. I think that it's categorically, in my opinion, corrupt by its very nature, despite anyone's particular faith. Organized religion usually requires some sort of institutional structure, and thereby, equates to a mini government of sorts. And we all know what happens to governments. So I've never been a fan of organized religion, and how corruptible it seems to be. And the Catholic Church is probably right at the top of that list as far as history with these types of things. And this is not new. You mentioned how many cases did you mention? 300.
Well, 300 priests
just
over
in
70
Pennsylvania, is that correct?
Yeah, 300 priests over 70 years abused over 1,000 children. And they're calling this they're calling this the most the biggest explosion of allegations since Boston in 2002, where the Catholic Church had to pay out billions of dollars in settlements and add new prevention programs with the church. I mean, this is just sickening. Right. Absolutely sickening. I mean,
yeah, and unfortunately, this I can tell you from research I've done in the past, and not to get off too far off point here, but my entire motivation for getting involved in alternative news and investigating conspiracy theories and all that sort of thing. In other words, looking at things through a different lens, actually started because of the Catholic Church. That's where it started 30 years ago for me, 1988. So that's where it came to be for me. And back then we didn't have the internet. We had to go to the library and, investigate things with microfiche and go, things like that. So, and read books and do it the old school way. And no, this is absolutely nothing new for the Catholic Church. They have a very long history of these sorts of things, and they're a very, very powerful institution. And sometimes, I mean, the Vatican is its own country. They have their own laws, their own police force, their own jurisdiction. They are actually technically not even part of Italy, of Rome at all. They are actually their own jurisdiction. and they have a lot of power. So it's very difficult to prosecute at the highest levels of the church. Now, on American soil, it becomes easier to prosecute, but they're going to still do everything within their power to bury these stories, move people to different locations, and keep it as quiet as they can. They have a long, long history of doing that.
Dave, can I ask Jamie a question quick?
Sure.
Jamie, don't you think, though, or what's your opinion on the idea that while sure they can be prosecuted here on U.S. soil, the church worked to ship off many priests or move them from one diocese to another out of the country? They certainly had their hand in sort of helping these priests avoid prosecution. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's their general tactic, and they've been doing that since the beginning. From the beginning, I believe it was, I started to say Michael might be able to help us with this, but I believe it was the early 70s. There was the first real huge scandal that was publicized that I remember, and I can't remember the exact year or the circumstances, but at that time, that's when when I went back and investigated those things, that's when I started noticing that trend that Everett is talking about, moving the priest from out of the country in most cases to avoid prosecution, and sometimes they would move them different parts of the country, whatever it took to help them avoid prosecution. But that's not new. That goes way back. So Everett's right on point. I mean, Michael might be able to lend some more technical details on dates and that sort of thing. But I do remember a lot of cases in the past where priests were actually moved, and other member of the clergy were actually moved out of the country to avoid prosecution.
Yes, there is a strategy to this entire process that seems to be taking place with these old historical, abuse cases, and of course the ones that are being uncovered now, in the fact that if indeed they can postpone any serious criminal lawsuits or charges, against these priests by moving them around, and or covering up whatever they can as far as these alleged scandals, the statute of limitations can limit the fact that they can be charged with a crime, and so basically they have the motivation in many cases. I mean, you have to realize the Catholic Church has actually paid billions with a B dollars to victims, and trying to manage this problem over the recent years. So it's a major issue. But indeed, if they can postpone any kind of serious investigation in any way they can, then you're dealing with a statute of limitations issue.
Michael, I want to talk to you about the grand jury on this case, because they said that while some of the priests were removed from the ministry, some of the church officials who protected them remained in office or even got promoted, including an abusive priest, Cardinal Donald Wuerl, now Archbishop of Washington. And it just seems like, even though the grand jury is trying to crack down on this, on the rule of the law to protect these children, that there is a cover-up.
Yes, and if you will note in that article as well, and in the report, it notes that the The Archbishop of Washington was also the one that had to step down from his position because of the sexual assault charges. So the person that is replacing that Archbishop is the one that was basically helping kind of like keep this thing under wraps, and potentially it could have been maybe some kind of a reward for whatever work they did in dealing with this problem that led to these priests having to resign from their office. So it is very, very concerning that this is as rampant as it seems to be. I mean, in reality, you're correct, David. You're talking thousands of children over 70 years, and it is just now being come out in the Attorney General's report. So one of the issues in the report mentioned that they believe there are probably thousands and thousands of more victims that have not come forth and maybe will not come forth. So this is just kind of maybe the tip of the iceberg.
Everett Thiemer, I want to bring you in here for a second to take a look at the mainstream media, because I think the mainstream media, when it comes to the Catholic Church, has been bang on with it. They have hammered the church, and we have to describe, this isn't a religious thing. This is a bunch of sick people who are being covered up on a political angle. And the media has actually, on the mainstream side, I think has played this very well, continuing to put pressure on the church and the dioceses that are around. Yet the response from the church has been, from the Pope on down, has been very neglectful, outside of our famous thoughts and prayers.
You're right. The media has really done a good job on this one. But, and I hate to label religions, I want to tread lightly here, but it almost seems as though the Catholic Church is thumbing its nose at laws of the country. And other countries too. In a way, it just seems like they feel that, you always get we will handle this internally or something along those lines. And then that priest or that person is sent somewhere else. Obviously, we can't necessarily prosecute on the really old cases, but there are still cases coming up that maybe aren't making the headlines like this one is, but the church still seems to, even with the pressure, even with being called out and people talking about this, it seems to me that they still just kind of thumb their nose at the laws a little bit. And I don't see anybody, while we can write articles and we can talk about it, there's nobody putting direct pressure, or at least effectively putting direct pressure on the Vatican for people to face the crimes that they've done.
And that's a good point. Jamie, I bring you back in here for a second. Where's the UN on this? Where is the UN? They are supposed to be the protector of all people. I hear you laughing, and I note your sarcasm right there. But this is exactly the type of situation that the UN was formed to try and protect, as they try to protect citizens of the world, and they're not. Where's the pressure? And who does that pressure come from?
Well, you would have to first presume that the UN has more leverage than the Vatican, which they don't. As far as I'm concerned, the UN is an instrument, and that's in globalism. So that's a whole nother topic. So, but aside from the UN, where are concerned citizens of the world and authorities that probably should be doing something? I don't know. I think, to be perfectly honest with you, if I just want to make a blanket statement on this, I really believe that the Catholic Church, there aren't many bigger dogs out in the world when it comes to power. The Catholic Church has a lot of power historically. I had mentioned earlier that that in '88 I started, my path on, delving into alternative things that were going on in the world, things that you don't really see on the news, things you're not going to read in books and you're not really going to hear about. And not the bestseller books. And that path started. I had a job. I was working with this guy. Every day we would have lunch together on our lunch break, and he was a religious guy, not a Catholic, but another religion, and he couldn't stand the Catholic Church, and but he wanted to talk to me about his religion, this, that, and the other thing. Anyway, eventually we started talking about things, and he's the one that pointed out some of the things about the Catholic Church. Well, I really at first had no interest in it, but when I started looking at it, one of the things that he told me that really caught my attention, I was just curious about it, was he said, did you ever notice that when any world leader, especially world leaders from the West, anytime they go meet with another world leader, always stop at the Vatican? And I thought, no, that can't be. What? He said, yeah, they go to the Vatican, but they have a behind, they have the photo op and everything, but they also have a meeting behind closed doors. When two world leaders meet, they always do that. And I thought, no. Well, it turned out that he was right. In most cases, that is exactly what they do. And, world leaders will go over and get down on their knees and kiss the Pope's ring. And if you don't believe me, go and just look up the photos. They're everywhere. All of these world leaders will do that. Now, that seems to be very telling to me. That to me is very scary. So when you talk about the UN leveraging power against the Vatican, I don't think they're higher up on the power totem pole than the Vatican, to be perfectly honest with you. The Vatican is very, very powerful historically.
Well, I think it all comes down to, and I'll say this as the final word on this story, I think it's time that these priests are able to get laid. And that's what it comes down to. I mean, let's face it, how much of this crap and this sodomy of children would stop if they were allowed to have a wife? I think a lot of it. I really do think a lot of it.
I don't know. Yeah. Well, from what I understand, a lot of them actually do have girlfriends and are married too. Unfortunately, I don't think it's a matter of sexuality as much as it is a much more disturbing trend with them. Child abuse usually isn't about, sexual abuse to children usually isn't even about sex. It's a deep mental problem, and sometimes it's a cult issue. There's deeper things that are going on there. But yeah, I mean, they definitely need to lift the veil off of this one and go after. Someone needs to start going after them.
I want to get into one more religious story here. And not so much about religion, but it does tie to it. Everett Thiemer the other night brought a story onto the encounter regarding Joel Osteen, Jamie, and his mega church. His mega church winning or getting and receiving an award from the city of Houston for everything that they did during Hurricane Harvey. Yet Everett pointed out that it really wasn't until they started bowing to the political and the media and the public pressure on social media that they finally opened up the church. They said the church was flooded. People went down there. There was no flooding whatsoever around the big church, which is the former Houston Rockets stadium, an arena that they played in. What do you think about the city cowering or to Joel Osteen and giving them an award when they didn't even want to do a darn thing to help their own citizens?
Yeah, that's politics after the fact. It probably one hand washing the other. But yeah, Osteen himself said he did not want to. He said his church is not going to be used as a refuge for people. During that crisis, he's the one that made the statement. not a representative from the church, anyone else. He made this statement. And, of course, as you said, he had to walk that back after pressure. So I would imagine that, he probably bought himself some optics politically after the fact to make it, but yeah, it was disgusting. I have an aunt that really watches Olstein, and she wasn't even aware that he had done that at first. And then I told her, and she was like, oh gosh, but yeah, that was terrible.
Michael W. Hall, I want
Politics.
Michael W. Hall, I want to get your opinion on that. How much does that affect the public's trust or mistrust, not only in the media, but in life in general, when they see what happened at the beginning with Joel Osteen and his megachurch, and then their own city is giving them an award?
Well, yes. I mean, those kinds of issues, when you're talking mega churches to begin with, and the local community, the relationship between the two is got to be very close and got to be very kind of disconcerting if you're looking at either side, because when you're talking a large church that has the separation of church and state, dealing with a state, a local, city, county, rules and regulations, there is always going to be some friction there on both sides of the fence. I know how, many of the large churches have to, deal with the local ordinances, and have to walk a kind of a thin line when they're dealing with their religious rights, as opposed to the community's, public safety rights and all those kinds of things. So I would imagine that there had been some friction to begin with between that church, Pastor Olstein's church, being so large, and the city of Lakewood. Obviously, that is something that is probably a history there that we don't even know about. Maybe he was being pressured by some city officials during that period of time, and he didn't want to be pushed around. I don't know. Then, of course, when the story gets bigger, and it's not just behind the closed doors kind of negotiations, and someone goes to the press, then, of course, it gets larger, and he has to deal with it. Both sides have to deal with it on either side of the fence. So, those things are really kind of touchy when you're dealing with religion and the state, and how you're going to, have a relationship between the two of them as they're coexisting in a small area like that.
Everett Themer, I'm going to give you a final word on that, because you're the one who brought the story from the encounter to us in regards to it. What has been the public fallout in regards to this? Is the anger still there, or are people just saying, whatever, what's the point of even bitching and complaining anymore, because it's going to fall on deaf ears anyhow? Let's just move on.
I think there's an underlying factor of anger, but most people have just kind of moved on and chalked it up to one of those mega church moves. And, there are still people that are upset, but certainly the parishioners have moved on. And obviously the city of Houston, even in that story, sort of hinted that the church had made an error in their judgment, but it was time for everybody to move on in giving them the award as well. So I think it's kind of a balance of both. There's a lot of people still a little irritated with it, but everybody's mostly moved on.
Is that the problem, Jamie, and we got about 2 minutes here before we got to go to break. Is that the problem, Jamie, is that we as the public, because we are so social media friendly now, that it's already old hat? Let's forget about it. We've expressed our anger. We've made our posts. Now let's move on to the next thing that offends us. Is that what it's all about when it comes to something like this?
Well, yeah, unfortunately, on most topics, big or small, the public has a very, very short attention span, and they don't really seem all that invested. I mean, I talked about this on a previous show where people people are more reactive than active. They you know, especially in environments like social media, they react very emotionally to things, especially in a mob or a group, group think. But they're not really invested. They'll make a meme about something or take a political dig in this direction or the other, but they're not really truly invested. So a story like this doesn't really stick with people that aren't, directly related to the church or to the community. They might have initial outrage or express that, but at the end of the day, they don't really care. And I think that people, by and large, they're smart enough to understand that, as Michael suggested, they're a big mega church. And although they do have, on the one hand, friction with politicians and their communities and community management and those sorts of things, that's true, but they also have arrangements and deals, and they know how to grease the wheel when they need to, and because for a church to survive and no matter how big or small, they have to have some political connections. They're supposed to be tax exempt, entity, and but yet they have to follow other codes and this and that and the other thing. So there's still some political connection there. And I would imagine that after all the dust settled on the crisis, what happened was that, as I suggested earlier, my guess is that Olstein probably, greased some wheels to get himself some good optics, some good press at the end of it. I can't. Because I think the premise of you bringing this up is that it's disturbing that someone would turn their back on their community and then later on get an award. So there is some irony there, but I think that's what it is. I think it's politics, and
Sounds like it.
I think Olstein wanted to come out smelling like a rose.
Jamie, I got to cut you off right there. We got Jamie Sexton, the Rebel Planet, Michael W. Hall, paranormal lawyer, and Everett Themer from The Encounter. We're going to get into Alex Jones next on Spaced Out Radio, so stay tuned. You'll be quite surprised at some of the reactions we're going to get here in the next little bit. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. We'll be back after this.
Find your escape where time has no limits. It's about living today and cherishing the heritage of yesterday. A spirit of adventure for what is new, with the nostalgia of the past. Your timepiece is a reflection of who you are. Life surrounded by beauty from the world around us to the soul within. EscapeWatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
The freedom to post what you want, when you want. That's the social media freedom you need. Social Media Freedom is the free app in your app store. No need to worry about going to jail or being shadow banned any longer. It's the freedom to say what you feel. The freedom to know Big Brother isn't watching. It's the way social media is supposed to be. Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free. Download from your app store today.
Coming September 28th to the 30th, it's our first annual Caribou Paracon, put on by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. 3 days of paranormal, supernatural, and spiritual knowledge in the beautiful 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Tickets are $150 Canadian for the event, being held at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Come watch our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Lorian Fenton, David Weatherly, Ross Allison, and more. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
Hi there, this is Tessa Nicole Thomas, and I'm going to take you for a ride every Sunday night on Spaced Out Sundays. I'm going to set up your week with some strange tales from across North America, from psychic readings, Sasquatch, UFOs, to the most haunted locations. Come join me at spacedoutradio.com starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, and let's get weird together. I'd love for you to join me. Spaced Out Sundays at spacedoutradio.com.
There's news, and there's The Encounter. This is Spaced Out Radio News Director Everett Thiemer inviting you to check out The Encounter. Our half-hour news segment every Monday through Friday night is different compared to what you're used to. Our goal is to bring you the weird, strange, and interesting stories the mainstream tends to leave out, and stories that will make you scratch your head in disbelief. The Encounter can also be found at spacedoutradio.com and on our Facebook page, SOR The Encounter. Come give us a read.
We're bringing scientific thought to the paranormal. Hi there, this is Spaced Out Radio scientist Chris Cogswell. Join me, Chris Zuger, and Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month, where we break down the who from the woo when it comes to everything paranormal. We'll investigate and try to bring sensible answers to those straight and sometimes outlandish questions people have. Hey, not everything has an answer, but we'll do our best. Listen in to Reality Paranormal only on Spaced Out Radio.
Heading to Vancouver and looking for some great nightlife? The Moose Vancouver is the place to be. Catch a game on one of the big screens or just come rock out to your favorite 80s and 90s hair bands. Great food starting at $6.95. The Moose Vancouver is open until 2 a.m. nightly. It's easy to find near the corner of Nelson and Granville. The Moose Vancouver is the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Do you want to know what's really going on in your world? Do you have questions about who you can trust in the mainstream media? Then look no further than the Rebel Planet. Come get the straight answers right here at spacedoutradio.com. Join me, Jamie Sexton, creator of Rebel Planet News, as I fill you in on the stories behind the stories. All you truth seekers, be sure to tune in to Rebel Planet on spacedoutradio.com the third Thursday of every month.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio. Tonight, I am your host, Dave Scott. Thank you so much for being with us. Tomorrow night on the show, Naomi West joins us as we're going to discuss the unusual supernatural phenomenon of time slips. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, at spacedoutradio.com. We say hello to everyone listening in on the SOR Radio Network and Deep Talk Radio, even though Tim is a St. Louis Blues fan. And don't forget, you can also check out our archives for free. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Stones. Stones is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, we got a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, shop at our Spaced Out Radio store, read up on the encounter online, and so much more. Don't forget, right now, if you want to watch Grant Cameron, Lorian Fenton, David Weatherly, Ross Allison, Michael W. Hall, myself, and many others speaking at the Caribou Paracon, you can get tickets right now. Go to questers.ca/fall conference. So questers.ca, click on Fall Conference, September 28th through 30th. This event is brought to you by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. We want to see all of you up here at beautiful British Columbia being held at the Spruce Hill Resort and Spa. I got to tell you guys, as we bring in our panel of Jamie Sexton, Everett Thiemer, and Michael W. Hall for tonight's Rebel Planet with Jamie Sexton. I got to tell you, I went up to the Spruce Hill Resort and Spa where we're going to be having the Paracon this year, and it's a beautiful resort. It's like 13,000 acres, this resort. It is massive. Anyways, I'm pulling in to their driveway, right off the highway, and I got greeted by a beautiful black bear today. Beautiful black bear. And I tell you, I just love that part of nature, man. Love that part of nature where you can, you can just be sitting there driving, to go for a swim at the spa. And the next thing you know, you're being greeted by a black bear as you come up the driveway. It's fantastic. Love it. Beautiful.
Yes, it's always nice to turn the corner and run into something that could eat you.
Hey, I got to tell you, though, and I was mentioning this to the guys during the break, this bear was literally about 25 feet away. I opened up my window, and this bear was so freaked out. It ran to the first tree, and it's debating whether or not to climb the tree, and I could just imagine what the bear is saying, go away, you stinky human. Leave me alone. Don't bug me. Get your smelly ass out of here. I could just see it right now. So, I mean, this bear, he didn't want any part of us, but he was cute nonetheless. I got pictures. If you go to hashtag Spaced Out Radio, I've got pictures of the bear up there on Twitter. So you can check that out. Or if you're on my friend of mine on my Facebook page, you can go there as well to check it out. Real cute little guy. Real cute. Anyways, gentlemen, Jamie Sexton from the Rebel Planet. We got paranormal lawyer Michael W. Hall, and from the Encounter, Everett Thiemer. We're doing a little bit of a panel tonight because for the next while, we are going to talk about something major that has happened recently in regards to the debate between social media and freedom of speech. Now, everybody knows that Alex Jones at the best of times is very, very controversial, highly controversial. Some people are fans, some people are not. But, when it comes to having some say in the media, he has a lot of pull. Whether you like that or not, it's really irrelevant because he does have his fans and he does have his detractors. Now, last week, Facebook, Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, they all seem to collaborate together, Jamie, and shut Alex Jones down. Now, is this more about who it is, Jamie, rather than what it's about, which is freedom of speech, freedom of expression?
I think it's a little bit of both. As far as the First Amendment issue, and we can get deeper into that as we go. Of course, in the context of social media platform, the First Amendment doesn't apply from a legal perspective, because those are privately owned companies, and so it's kind of their own jurisdiction, their own call. As a matter of principle, on the other hand, I think those actions and other actions by those types of platforms and even mainstream news agencies, et cetera, you are seeing a move against free speech. And so I think that does feed into it in that respect. As far as Alex goes, again, love him or hate him, he is who he is. You know what you're getting with the guy. But a lot of times, despite his style or despite controversial subjects that, you may agree or disagree with him on, a lot of times he will cover things that mainstream news agencies just will not cover. And they've turned out to be very, very accurate. And a lot of times when he's over the target is when he takes the most heat. And I think that's been recently. That's been quite often. As far as him being banned on those platforms, they haven't really given a reason. But again, from a legal perspective, they don't necessarily have to. They can give you. They don't have to. Technically, from a legal perspective, I'm not sure they really have to give you a reason at all. But in most cases, they've said, basically just said, you violated our terms and conditions. I'm paraphrasing, but that's the sum total of the reasoning. And incidentally, Alex isn't the only one that's been suffering from those type of blackouts recently. There's been others.
Yeah, and the reason why we're kind of focusing on Alex Jones is because he's the big dog. He's the big cat when it comes to all of this and his InfoWars team. And they have been controversial. Okay, they have tried at times to incite some riots and incite anger in people, especially during the election. They have...
Well, I would categorically disagree with that. I don't agree with that. No.
Well, running into a highly democratic, group of people and start insulting them on camera while you're live, and the videos we're all over YouTube. I mean, that pretty much says what it is. I mean, he did it in numerous cities, but.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely is controversial and confrontational, but that's not inciting a riot. That's an entirely different action. I wouldn't call that inciting a riot.
Well, how much of it though is a setup though? Okay, like I recall that one incident in Seattle where a gentleman just walked up to him and threw coffee in his face. Now, if that was scorching hot coffee...
I saw that.
If that was scorching hot coffee...
Yeah, I wouldn't call anybody that does that a gentleman.
Well, I that's a Canadian in me. I'm trying to be polite here.
Okay. But I got to account for that.
Exactly. But the idea behind it is when that person threw that coffee on him, to me... And I'm not saying it was, but if we talk a little bit about, and we've talked numerous times on this about fake news, if that was boiling hot coffee, the reaction would have been a heck of a lot different on Jones, who was claiming that it was.
Right.
I don't know, and I'm just wondering how much of this is acting and staged, like he has said during his divorce trials.
Well, I mean, I really have no way to personally know whether that particular incident was staged. Knowing Alex, which I do, and the confrontations that come to him on the streets as well, it didn't look fake at all to me. It looked pretty organic. But I will agree that if it was scalding hot coffee, he took it pretty well. I mean, who knows, but... he may have overblown. Oh, it was scalding hot coffee. If somebody threw scalding hot coffee on me, I'd probably be calling you to bail me out. 'Cause
Well,
I'm not just going to sit there over it.
That's where you call the paranormal lawyer, Michael W. Hall. Mike, I want to get your opinion on this in regards to it. Is this a First Amendment issue, or is this a social media platform, or these social media platforms that are leaning one way politically or another, or are they just concerned because they feel he actually did, what's the word I'm looking for, abuse their terms and conditions?
Right. Well, it's probably the terms and conditions that are right at the crux of this matter. When you're dealing with a private company that is dealing with the public, it's almost as if when we were talking about that church and state issue, where private churches have the right to basically have the public come into their premises, but they're not going to tolerate whatever terms and conditions they've laid down as far as their own, sanctuary and mode of operation in their religious practices. But here's the issue with the Facebook and all of these other social media giants, really, that are actually now controlling the actual speech that we are able to create and to share amongst ourselves. That's when it comes down to the idea that, is there collusion going on between these giants out there that have that have the ability to shut down speech and activity and ideas that they don't necessarily like. Matter of fact, the typical terms and conditions of one of the giants like this in Facebook, they are going to use some very broad language that will allow them to have pretty much whatever kind of clout they want to have in dealing with people that become either politically charged or controversial. I can read you just a short version of some of the terms and conditions that we're dealing with in Facebook particularly. It says right in the terms and conditions that you may not use our products to do anything or share anything that, then there's bullet points, that violate the terms and or community standards or other terms and policies that apply to your use of Facebook. So they have developed their own community standards. And, of course, other terms and policies that they are going to use or point to in the regard to whether you can use their product, for social media purposes. So it is kind of getting interesting. And matter of fact, the only way that the public can deal with these things on a general basis is, some kind of not using their products, getting into some of the other apps and some of the other things that are coming along that seem to be a little bit more free and or less egregious in their terms and conditions. So, what happens, one of my old law professors would always tell us, in any kind of a situation, that economy always prevails. So at one point, Facebook is going to realize that they're getting hit in the pocketbook by people who are going elsewhere because of their community standards and terms and policies. And so it will kind of swing back the other way. But right now, I think the public needs to determine which way they want to go. Do they want to be controlled like this or not?
But Mike, and before I bring Everett in here, does the public even recall that even though Facebook and Twitter, Instagram, whatever the site may be, is public for personal information, do they even recall or realize, for the most part, that these are private corporations that are running these websites, and they do have rules and guidelines? Because I think it's much like the internet, where people just think, okay, Facebook is here, Instagram is here, YouTube is here, do what you want, as long as there's no nudity.
Yeah, and that's exactly right, Dave. People, in the past, when we first got into the internet, and even the baby boomers were starting to figure out how to do things, on the computers, they really didn't realize that there was even a choice, or that there was a problem, with it. Or they probably didn't even realize that it was such a powerful tool that they could use as well. So we were just kind of using it as entertainment for many, many years, probably the last 2 or 3 decades. But as technology advances and as the millennials grow up now and assume some of the power that they have been able to wield with technology, I think what you're going to find is that the playing field is going to level very quickly to people who want to be able to use social media in certain ways, and people that don't mind the way that they are controlled on certain social media things. So I think it's going to open up very, very fast in the very near future with all these new abilities. And of course, that brings up the whole issue of the AI, the artificial intelligence that are built into many of these systems that will be monitoring us in ways that we have no idea about, even though we think we're having more freedom as we use these products.
Everett Thiemer, I want to bring you in here for a second because and Jamie, I want to get your reaction to this, because on InfoWars website, which is Alex Jones Broadcast Center and Company, it says on their own terms of service, and I thank Mr. A-Hole Skeptic for bringing this up on Twitter at #SpacedOutRadio. It says, you are a guest here. It is not censorship if you violate the rules and your post is deleted. All civilizations have rules, and if you violate them, you can expect to be ostracized from the tribe. That's on InfoWars' own website. So when they have that on their own website, why is it okay for them to have it there, and it's not okay for social media sites like YouTube or Facebook to have those same terms and conditions and pull it down if they're violated?
Oh, the irony, huh?
Tell me about it.
I think this is a case where Alex Jones is a personality. He is not a journalist. He's more of an entertainer. And I think this is a case where he wants it one-sided. He wants to put out his product, his image, and he's not concerned with anybody else's terms of service. I mean, let's be honest. How many of us have really gone through and read the TOS for Twitter and Facebook and Instagram? I would bet that less than 5% of us have actually probably done that. So, certainly he's going to want to protect his product or his image or his material, and he's not going to want somebody to come onto his website and post something that he finds objectionable. And that's reasonable. He's just got to accept that other private companies can do that too.
Mm-hmm. Jamie, your thoughts?
I don't think he violated any terms, to be honest with you. I think that's a cop-out. And the fact that all of these platforms made a unilateral decision in concert to do that at once speaks to a bigger situation. None of the platforms have given a satisfactory cause of action for what they did whatsoever. And I would disagree with Everett that Alex wants it both ways. I don't go along with that at all. If it seems like I'm protecting Alex a little bit tonight, I am, and I'll be upfront about that. I think that what we're witnessing with these actions is extremely alarming. Now, I agree with Michael that these companies are private, and I said it from the beginning there that they're free to make their own terms and conditions across the board for whatever they want to do, but they also have a bit of a monopoly. And I also agree with Michael in the sense that the only real solution to this monopoly squeezing a fair and balanced sort of playing field out there that sort of mirrors the principles of free speech is competition. That is going to be the answer. Unfortunately, you just can't turn around and invent competitors to these things overnight. They do have a sort of monopoly. In fact, to such a degree that some people have even suggested that because of their monopoly and because it's so hard to, launch a worthy competitor, that some of these platforms may well face the prospect of becoming sort of defined as utilities in a way. For example, utilities such as water and electric, even if that's a private corporation that is supplying a certain area with those utilities, they can't deny someone's service, and that's almost a principle that's being considered out there for these things. I would disagree with that. Because I think that it sort of catches me in a catch-22. On the one hand, I like the idea because I don't like monopolies, especially ones that do sort of they have so much community influence, and they do pick and choose who they want politically to be heard, and they have all these other instruments at their hand, at their control, like shadow banning and all these different things. So on the one hand, principle based, I do like the idea that we would have some sort of leverage against them and say, well, you're now a utility, so you can't deny or discriminate. On the other hand, I like free enterprise, and I think I like the internet being open and free. And so I don't like the idea of any governing body controlling content, whether it be a website or somebody's speech. So on the one hand, basically what I would be doing if I supported the utility, give the government power or some governing body power to fight exactly what I don't like, which is control. And so if you want to start a Facebook or you want to start a YouTube or whatever else, I think that you should be able to create your own rules of your environment. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with anybody running their business as they see fit. But they have become a monopoly. So the only way out of this, after, if I look at it from all angles, really is only competition. And when they see that other platforms come out that don't discriminate, and then people jump ship, then they'll probably play ball. But until then, I don't like the looks of it. I don't like the way it feels.
Jamie, I want to hit you up on the collusion aspect of it. And then, Mike, we could get to you here in a second. But, I mean, it was a little ironic that all of these platforms...
So it wasn't ironic. It wasn't ironic at all. In fact, Apple's the one that engineered it. And they've admitted so. So it wasn't ironic. They actually called each other up and made a unilateral decision to do this. And... So it wasn't ironic at all. In fact, InfoWars' website was actually hacked day before yesterday as well, and it was down almost 18 to 20 hours. So yeah, it's an all-out attack on Jones, and it's politically motivated, and that's what it is, and is collusion. They've all been admitted that that's what it was.
Michael W. Hall, I want to get your opinion on this from a legal standpoint on this collusion to ban Alex Jones. Is that even legal from a legal standpoint if they're colluding to get rid of him?
Well, that's the case that you would bring in a class action lawsuit, of course. You would actually, allege collusion and monopoly and controlling the platforms that are available, almost like any other monopoly out there has been broken up over the years. Utilities and those kinds of things. Ma Bell, of course, was the major one here in the telephone industry of the United States. So it really does take some pressure by the public. Right now, I don't consider the public being up in arms about this thing yet because they're not that interested in one person who's out there alleging certain things. They are going to be interested when it starts affecting them in their own pocketbook and their own ability to make a living and live their lives. That's when, and of course, any social media platform, any government entity that is in charge of trying to keep the lid on things knows the power of the community, and they are not going to go as far as getting the ire up of enough people that could affect how they actually do business. So that's where this leveling out of the playing field is going to happen probably shortly, when it comes to the point where you're actually coming down and using AI to determine whether you're going to be able to get credit, whether you're going to be able to move to another state or live your life and get a job. Those kinds of things will be when the people start waking up.
Right. If I can respond to that.
Yeah, go right ahead.
That's the thing. When I said earlier, I'm defending Alex. Tonight I'm not worried about getting into the substance of Alex Jones or his style or any of those sorts of things. When I say I'm defending him, what I'm saying, you have to understand, Rebel Planet is also an alternative news site. That is my business, and it's very scary to me that these platforms can affect your business, because that is his business. And so today it's Alex Jones, tomorrow it's Rebel Planet or whoever. Once you start a precedence of being able to do this, AI or not AI, it's just a very slippery slope to get into. And so that's why I think it's extremely important. I think this story is very important, and it goes far beyond Alex Jones. In fact, like I said earlier, it's not just Alex Jones. They've been doing this to people all week. They did it to Stefan Molyneux. They did it to Gavin McInnes. They did it to a couple of left-wing outlets. They're picking and choosing who they want to affect, and I don't think it's I don't think it's a good precedent to set, to be honest with you.
Everett Themer, I want to bring you in here for a sec, because take away Alex Jones, okay, or what he stands for, or why people hate him, or why people love him. All right, but just the precipice of the entire situation, that people on what it seems like one side of the electrical ledger, they're being, some people feel they're being almost criminalized and demonized for their thoughts and their posts and what they are posting. And yes, Alex Jones is maybe on the extreme of that, but there are people who are getting their hands slapped for much less by these social media platforms, yet other accounts of groups, maybe on the other side of the political ledger, seem to be getting away. And it seems to be drawing a real divide, because and a lot of people, much like Ted Cruz or other people when Mark Zuckerberg went in front of the U.S. Senate and Congress to answer some questions, said, why is this happening? Why do we see a Republican platform getting demonized while the Democratic platform seems to be open season? Are you seeing that as well on a media standpoint?
Yes and no. In different areas. It kind of, depending on the topic and the particular Facebook page or website, I've seen different actions and reactions. What I've sat here and listened, and I have some questions. I have several questions because we've talked about the idea that this was collusion, but isn't it just possible that this was just reactionary? Apple banned Alex Jones, and then in the middle of the night, Facebook banned him, which is unusual for the way they operate. Isn't it possible that these other companies saw this taking place and kind of did a "what did Alex Jones do now" stance and just banned him just out of fear for the public relations that they would take if they allowed him to continue?
Jamie, you want to jump in on that?
Well, no. I no. In fact, the CEO from Apple already admitted that this was a colluded effort, as I stated earlier. So that's not even really up for debate anymore. They said that they made a unilateral decision to do this. So no. But even if it were as Everett suggested that one did it, so the others just piled on, that's not the way any corporation should run. It's not. I would think it would be smart business. I wouldn't make a unilateral decision just because my competitor did. I would have to weigh out the circumstances of what's going on and determine whether or not that's a good move for me. But to just arbitrarily shut someone down without cause, without stated cause, doesn't seem like a very fair thing to do. But to answer your question, no, it's not possible because they've already admitted that in fact, Mark Zuckerberg stated that Alex was asking for it. He wanted to be banned. They've all made statements about the decision to do it, and it's almost been a mockery of to themselves, the way they went up. So no real excuse has been given by any of these platforms as to why they decided to make that decision. In other words, in terms of a specific violation of terms. So it's just not a good precedent.
Let's take on another subject here. Let's take on another subject here because I want to bring this up because I think this is important in this discussion too, gentlemen. And that is the fact that, and Michael, we'll start with you on this one, the fact that Facebook just a few weeks ago got in hot water for people posting the U.S. Constitution.
Exactly.
and they were saying that it was referred to as hate speech or spam.
Yeah,
and they took a lot of heat for that. So where does this come from? Like, I realize the AI has a lot to do with it, okay, and the algorithms that go with it. But I mean, when you are considering the U.S. Constitution, hate speech and or spam, that's a whole different precedence and a whole different kettle of fish right there, is it not?
Well, you've got to also take into consideration how these issues are being used as well. You can take the phone book and make it quite concerning if you want to put different, inflections on it, or you want to use it in different, situations. So it's not necessarily the actual product that you're actually putting out there. It is kind of how the products are being used and the actual speech is being used as well. So if I were, for instance, a Facebook, if I were a large Apple type company, and I wanted to look out for my bottom line for the long term, not just for the next quarter, but I'm looking down the road for the next couple years or so, and I want to stay in business, I would imagine that there is a major push in their boardroom to try to keep the middle of the road, on all of these issues, and not stir up, the right wingers and not stir up the left wingers, and just keep the money coming in through their advertisers and keep basically being, the bigger slice of the pie out there, so that they don't look. It's almost like I remember the old days. I used to work at a Coca-Cola warehouse in Los Angeles before I went to law school. All of a sudden, Pepsi started eating into Coca-Cola's products and their sales, because Pepsi was a little sweeter than Coca-Cola at that point. They made some major difference moves in that regard, just to make sure that they kept their big piece of pie, in dealing with that kind of market. I would imagine these Facebooks and social media companies that are giants out there are always looking behind them and making sure that they're going to stay one step ahead of any other fledgling competition that's coming up behind them.
Jamie, on the Constitution there, where Facebook got in a little bit of hot water in regards to that, do you think that maybe, how does that even happen? I don't even know what to ask on that, because it is just so confusing for me how the backbone of the United States is not legal at some point on a social media platform that is in and created in the United States.
Yeah, listen, I'm going to make no bones about this. These platforms are motivated largely on if they have a political bias, it is to the left, and that's just a fact of matter. That's just the reality of the situation, and But again, I have to keep going back to the fact that it's their platform, but they are exposing themselves with that bias time and time and time and time again. And listen, who is the woman that just won the seat? The socialist girl. What's her name? I can't think of her name. She sent, actually, not even her. Who's Sarah Zhang? Is that her name? The
New York Times
journalist,
yes,
for the New York Times, right? Who has a string of racist posts. Some date as far back as 2014, and some of them are as recent as 2 months ago. And those tweets are still up, and she just got her account verified. They didn't take her down. They didn't delete her profile. And she's saying things on her Twitter. She's making tweets saying white people should die, and I enjoy being cruel to old white men, and all this stuff. That's outrageous. That is outrageous. But yet, she's still up on Twitter. So what terms and conditions is she adhering to? I'm curious about that. So when I hear people say there's not a political bias in these platforms, it's laughable to me. There absolutely 100% is, and it's it's just, to me, it's disgusting. And it doesn't matter if you're on the left or the right, or in the middle, or you don't care. To introduce to base your platform around a particular politics, fine, if you want to do that, but you cannot call yourself fair. You just can't. You're not a fair environment. You are a biased environment. That is your community. Michael talked about creating a community earlier. Well, if you're creating a community, these communities are showing their face. And Twitter tried to stay out of it. Twitter was the last one to hop on board with banning Alex. But Jake, the owner of Twitter, took so much flack over the past week for his decision not to ban Alex. And he's publicly stated, well, why would I ban Alex Jones? He hasn't violated any of our terms and conditions. Until he does, I'm not going to ban him. But, you know, all week that guy took so much pressure. He got threatened and all sorts of things. So, yes, we're dealing with a bias. And when you can't use your Facebook or your social media platform to post the Constitution, but you can post to say that you enjoy being cruel to old white men, and then you get your account verified, which is a thumbs up, you know, in the world of Twitter. Yeah, there's a bias, a clear bias out there.
Jamie, I have a question. If somebody were to take Sarah Young's tweets and just copy them, and over a month or so, just a nobody, just a typical Twitter user began to post exact copies of her tweets, not retweet them, but tweet them as their own.
Right.
What do you think the reaction would be from Twitter? Because I wonder,
they would delete them. They would, if it was brought to their attention, I would imagine that average user that you speak of would probably have their account suspended or deleted. That's what I would do. And, you know, for example, on my Facebook, I had someone for a few years on my friends list, and I couldn't identify them. Everything that I posted got flagged. I don't care what it was. I could post a meme of Charlie Brown, non-political, non-anything, and it would get flagged. And then I would go, and then I would get a friend's request from a catfish or someone I didn't know, and I would look on the page and say, well, I got this friend's request. Who is this person? And I would click on the page, and the page would be nothing but porn. I got one today. There is so much porn on this page. I mean, that's all the page was. It was a Facebook trying to promote porn, and it was just littered, post after post after post of porn. So my thinking in that is that somebody just hasn't reported that page yet. But as soon as they do, of course, it will be taken down. But with my post, for a while, I had a hater on my page. So everything that I posted, we got flagged, everything. And, of course, a lot of times they wouldn't shut me down or they wouldn't suspend my account or whatever, but they would say, this post has been flagged for review or something like that. And then within a matter of hours, I would be okay. But that's how I determined I was able to discern that someone had actually set out a mission to, you know, make me their target. So I guess, you know, to answer your question, if someone were to, an average user were to just post the same thing as her, I would imagine that their account would be shut down or suspended if it was brought to someone's attention. But I think that I don't think that qualifies as discounting a political bias. I think the fact that she's high profile actually kind of speaks to that, because if they take her down, then they're validating, you know, they're invalidating her, and I think they want to prop her up. I think she's a face. She has a following. So that's somebody that politically they've made a choice to prop up. But your average user, they don't mind enforcing the rules on an average user because they probably don't have enough following to make a difference anyway. But they have been slow or completely absent in disciplining her.
Michael W.
And
Hall,
the media as well.
Michael W. Hall, I want to bring you in here for a quick second on this because, in this situation where Sarah Young is now a high-profile position with the New York Times, is it out of the ordinary what she has been posting, considering what a lot of trolls and a lot of people who post their vile anger and vitriol, whether it's at a culture, a race, a sexual orientation, which is all over social media. Social media is not a polite place. It's just polite in the friends that you usually carry around with you. Do you see where I'm going with that?
Well, yes, of course. And, there's an analogy here that we were talking about a little earlier when, a church or a private organization has a relationship with a local state office or county government that they have to deal with. There is some give and take going on there. And, of course, when you're talking the New York Times, you're talking, a major, newspaper publisher and kind of like one of the other big dogs on the block dealing with Facebook. And they have to work out some kind of relationship between the two to be able to coexist and maybe even assist each other in certain areas as far as, what is going to be news and what's not going to be news. So I would imagine some of that has to do with what kind of relationships these various media outlets have with, the larger social media companies as well. There's got to be some relationship there that we don't understand at this point.
Everett, is it a double standard on the media side, on the mainstream, that certain people get roasted for what they post, no matter how grotesque or vile it could be, while the other side of the political ledger seems to get a free pass? Is that even going on, or is that just the public making things up on their own?
I think to an extent it could be going on because you look at Sarah Young's tweets, and that's the thing. How many people went and looked at her tweets? How much ad revenue, how many clicks were generated for Twitter for people going and checking out her history of tweets? So maybe in a sense, they've left it alone because there are still people going out there going, I want to see this. I want to go to Twitter and look at this and find out what's going on. So I think certainly in certain cases, I think there is a double standard.
But what is that double standard?
Well, let's compare Sarah Young and Alex Jones. I'm not the biggest Alex Jones defender, but what is the difference? He goes more along the lines a little bit, the political fear mongering and that kind of thing. And she is just blatant hate speech. When you break it down to its bare bones, they're both kind of not a hatred, but they're I guess hatred would be the best word. So why is she being left, and why is he banned?
Right, I agree with you.
There's the double standard.
It's inflammatory. Both could be considered inflammatory. And, if we're really trying to break down, a principled argument on terms and conditions or community standards or what can affect people, inflammatory is inflammatory. So if you're going to deem one party inflammatory, you have, if you want to be fair, you have to do that across the board. And I just don't see that.
What's that corporate partnership like between the New York Times and Twitter? I mean, they have a pretty good working relationship, I believe. So is that factoring into it?
Like Michael suggests, yeah. Well, the New York Times is very it's considered a liberal publication. So again, I think that speaks to it as well from my analysis. So not only from a corporate standpoint, where Michael points out that yes, they need to keep a working relationship with other media. It might even be specific media. I just can't discount enough the stress enough, or discount the bias that I see daily in these situations.
Jamie, to play devil's advocate here, as we got about 90 seconds left, it's easy to sit there and say that you don't agree with it, but how do you find as a journalist or as an alternative journalist to find the balance between saying that you are taking a political side on this rather than trying to see it for down the middle?
On the issue?
Yeah.
Well, I am speaking to the issue. Just from an objective observation, it is clear to me that most of these platforms do have a political bias. If you really just look at it for what it is, that's a fact. If you look at late night talk shows, there's a political bias. If you look at Hollywood, there's a political bias. There really is a political bias, and anyone that doesn't really acknowledge that isn't really paying attention. I mean, there's a heavy political bias, and that seems to be filtering its way, or not filtering its way. It seems to be being imposed now on these social media platforms as well. I've seen it in mainstream news for the longest time. I've seen it in entertainment for the longest time. And this isn't an argument of supporting the left or supporting the right. It's just a matter of really objectively looking at the table and the way the cards are dealt. There is a very, very left-leaning bias when it comes to all forms of media. It's just the way it is. Music industry, the entertainment industry, news media, and now we're seeing it in social media. So that's just it's a trend.
All right,
it's what it is.
I got to cut you off right there because we're going to go to our final break of the night. The Rebel Planet with Jamie Sexton happens the third Thursday of every month, where we talk everything alternative and current in the news. Today is the one day of the month that we actually go down this realm outside of the paranormal. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back right after this.
Are you tired of being blocked, shadow banned, or placed in jail for simply posting your thoughts on social media? Social Media Freedom can take care of that for you. Social Media Freedom is the newest and one of the best free new apps that allows you the freedom to post what you want, when you want. It takes seconds to download from your app store. Come join the tribe at Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free.
The first annual Caribou Paracon is happening September 28th to 30th in the 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Brought to you by the Canadian Society of Questers and Spaced Out Radio. Come listen to our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Elizabeth Anglin, Paisley Town, Mike Moran, Eric Cooper, and more. It's a 3-day supernatural adventure at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Tickets for the weekend are $150 Canadian. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
A timepiece is a reflection of who you are, and what better way to show off the real you than with an Escape watch? Escape is a lifestyle brand accessorizing your days and nights. Choose to escape and create the life of discovery that you deserve. Dream, play, unite with your own personalized Escape watch. Head to escapewatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website, including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Find yourself constantly looking up in the sky, looking for answers? Have you had extraterrestrial contact? Are you an abductee? Looking for answers to your experiences? Hi there, I'm R. Keith Andrews, Spaced Out Radio's resident ET expert. Join me live the first Friday of every month where I take questions from the Spaced Out Radio chat room and help you understand those from the far-off world. It's 2 hours of knowledge every experiencer should listen to. Hope to see you there.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
The Call of the Wild is in Vancouver. The Moose Vancouver is one of the hottest bars and restaurants in the city. Open until 2 a.m. nightly, the Moose will rock you like a hurricane all night long. Great food with everything on the menu at $6.95 near the corner of Nelson and Granville. Get your horns up and come rock with us. The Moose Vancouver, the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your 4-Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
You know, it's hard being the bad man of ufology, but that's just the way that I like it. This is Chris George Zuger, and I'll be hanging out with Dave Scott and SOR scientist Chris Cogswell for Reality Paranormal, the second Wednesday of every month. And our job is to break it down and come to conclusions as to what is really going on in the supernatural world. I'd love for you to join us and bring your questions for us to investigate right here on Spaced Out Radio.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
When it comes to the news, we look for the stories that the mainstream won't cover. Welcome to Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter. This is News Director Everett Thiemer. The Encounter is about the weird and strange stories that occur daily, and we scour the world looking to bring them to you. You can hear me with Dave Scott every Monday through Friday in our Encounter news segment. Read us online at spacedoutradio.com or check us out and give our Facebook page a like at SOR The Encounter. So come give The Encounter a read.
From the Mile High State of Colorado, sharing our signal around the world, I invite you to Spaced Out Sundays. Hi, I'm Tessa Nicole Thomas, and I'm closing out the week by taking you on a paranormal journey to the world of the weird. Ghosts, aliens, psychic phenomena, I will hit it all in your questions too. So let us highlight the paranormal for you. So come join me for Spaced Out Sundays starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern, only at spacedoutradio.com.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio. Tonight, I am your host, Dave Scott. Thank you for being with us. Tomorrow night on the program, Naomi West joins us to discuss the unusual supernatural phenomenon of time slips. We'll get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern at spacedoutradio.com. We say hello to everyone listening in on the SOR Radio Network and Deep Talk Radio. Also, if you're looking for our archives, they are free on our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/spacedoutradio. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. He went easy on me tonight. Stones. Stones is your password. Make sure you use them wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you. You can rock out to Bumblefoot, shop at our store, read up on the encounter online, and so much more. Also, don't forget you can go to questers.ca right now. Questers.ca. Click on Fall Conference. Get your tickets for September 28th through 30th, the first annual Caribou Paracon, presented by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. It's going to be a great weekend event. We'd love to see you up here in beautiful 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. I'm sure the forest fires will be gone by then, but you can watch Grant Cameron, Lorian Fenton, David Weatherly, Ross Allison, Eric Cooper, Mike Morin, Michael W. Hall, myself, and so many more speaking on great paranormal topics, September 28th through 30th, the Caribou Paracon. For the final time tonight, we introduce Jamie Sexton from the Rebel Planet. The Rebel Planet is our alternative news feature that we do once a month here on the show. It happens the third Thursday of every month. Jamie will next be back on Thursday, September 20th. We're also joined tonight by Michael W. Hall, paranormal lawyer, as well as Everett Themer from the Encounter Online. And the reason why we got a panel going tonight is because of this entire Alex Jones fiasco that's going on. Whether you support Jones or whether you cannot stand the man, right now is irrelevant, because in this hour, what we're going to get, or this half hour before we go to the news, it's a little bit intriguing to see the debate, Jamie Sexton, as we bring you in, about the constitutional law of this and whether or not the First Amendment of the United States has been violated in this case. What is your stance on that?
No, I don't believe it has been violated. I think it's a pretty cut and dry case as far as the fact that these social media platforms are privately owned. And so therefore they should have the legal right, in my opinion, to decide who and what they want on their platform. If I'm speaking from a legal perspective, that would be my take on it. And I think that that's correct. I would support that as far as the legal part of it. But what's right and what's wrong are two different things. Whether they should or shouldn't do that is a whole different issue. But I don't think from a legal perspective you can say to a business that you're violating the First Amendment by imposing whatever rules or standards or actions, for that matter, that you deem appropriate. That's my take on it.
Well, what do you think's with that argument then? Because there's a lot of people on social media right now saying that this is a First Amendment issue.
Well, I think they're thinking in terms of principle, and they don't really make the distinction between a private entity, a business, which is what these platforms are, versus society. To them, these platforms are society, and they're not. But that kind of speaks to what I was speaking about earlier, whereas they've become such a big part of our lives that they're almost a utility in a way. So I think the real debate is whether they should or shouldn't be treating, in other words, the platforms, whether they should or shouldn't be acting in accordance with principles like the First Amendment. That's a different argument. As far as are they obligated to from a legal perspective, no, they're really not. Now, I did have a question for Michael, though, because earlier he suggested that some sort of legal maneuver against monopoly and collusion and those sorts of things. Is that something that he would consider a viable option for someone in this situation, or is that probably not enforceable in this case?
Yeah, that would be, a very difficult thing to do on an individual basis. You'd really have to find some large class action that would want to push that and make a big case out of it. And of course, what you'd have to do is bring it all the way up to probably this U.S. Supreme Court to actually get a ruling, and whether they would actually grant certiorari and actually do that, give a ruling in that regard would be something, maybe even a political decision at that level. But here's another issue to think about, and I've always wondered in this regard whether this would be something that you could use with a almost a constitutional argument about the social media platforms, controlling what they are going to show and what you can put up there. I'm just wondering if any of these social media large companies are receiving any tax dollars. Are they receiving any government support? And if indeed they are, then that brings the whole issue of a private company into a wider range, and potentially, they would be falling underneath the terms of the Constitution and free speech and those kinds of things, if indeed they are, taking our tax dollars for support from the government.
That's interesting. I wouldn't think they were, but that's interesting.
Everett?
Michael,
yeah.
This isn't a forced monopoly. It's not like a municipality who contracts with one cable provider to provide cable services for the entire town.
Right.
How would somebody? I mean, Facebook has had its competitors, and they've fallen to the wayside. MySpace is still technically out there. I don't know anybody that really actively uses it, but that could be argued that it's a Facebook competitor. How do you go about mandating the breakup of something like this if you're going to call it a monopoly?
Right. I was going to ask the same thing. It's more of an organic monopoly as opposed to a deliberate monopoly, isn't it?
Yeah, it wouldn't be like, Ma Bell, for instance, those kinds of issues where you were, like you said, mandating that everyone has to use this certain telephone company, to get service, or utility, kind of an issue as well. But it almost de facto, though, there are no other real competitors, other than the major social media platforms out there that could, bring together that issue of whether there was a monopoly. And if indeed you're correct on the issue, Jamie, where these companies were, if it wasn't collusion, it was communicating with one another regarding the specific Alex Jones matter, then you're getting into those issues of, people, creating a monopoly amongst the only viable social media platforms out there. And then again, if you put on top of that any kind of government support or tax dollars going in their direction, or not even tax dollars, but let's say potentially tax breaks, for this company to operate, then you're talking maybe the Constitution would apply.
Right. You raised a good point there, because my question was, if these companies collaborated to do this, and that could be proven in court, in other words, evidence to be brought, and none of these companies could effectively show that Jones, for example, broke their terms and violations, then would there be recourse for someone like that on the basis that, well, your platform is actually a form of advertising for my show, and you collectively made a decision to affect that without breaking your rules? Is there any legal recourse for someone in that situation?
Well, there would definitely be some civil claims of action that an individual like or a company like Alex Jones could bring if there was what they call the tort of interference with business relations. And of course, that's exactly what's going on with when you take a social media platform that's basically the only monopoly out there that they can use, and they unilaterally decide that they're going to pick and choose who they want to allow to be on their platform. So, there would be a civil lawsuit, of course.
Okay.
And
that would be my concern for someone, if this becomes a trend where, these companies can just unilaterally or even individually decide that they want to shut someone down without justifiable cause. I just wonder how the balance works there with the fact that if you're a business and part of your advertising is on one of these platforms, and they just decide for whatever reason to take you off, I don't know if there's a precedent or if there even could be for suing one of these companies for taking you down and deleting your content and other things, which would affect your business essentially.
Yes, exactly. That's that's the lawsuit just waiting to happen at one point, and it's going to take probably some pretty big players to step up to the plate to be able to force that kind of a cause of action, because many times these things will just be brought by individuals, the plaintiff's attorneys out there that decide they want to get a few of the folks together to push an issue. But if they can't get past the appeals court, get to their own state Supreme Court and go beyond that, it's very difficult to push the matter.
I want to jump in here for a second and ask a question, because, I haven't seen, and maybe it's because I'm up in Canada here, but I haven't seen a lot of reaction from the Republican side of the ledger with politicians the way they were so handily ready to go after Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook in the congressional hearings. Everett, have you seen any Republicans come out and back Alex Jones and, publicly state what their issues is, or maybe they're saying, well, here goes Facebook all over again after we just had Zuckerberg in Congress?
No, I haven't seen any Republicans take a really staunch stance against it. I've seen a couple of statements here and there where some different lower level politicians have made comments about the idea that maybe this is an attack on the Republican Party, but there isn't that party outcry defending him like you might expect.
Does that surprise you? Considering, this is a guy who Donald Trump has his personal number and vice versa.
No, it doesn't surprise me, because I think Alex Jones is that media person that the Republicans may want out there, but because of his persona and the way people perceive him, they may not want to really commit to backing him, depending on the their constituents in their districts. You know, they want him there, but they don't really necessarily want to give him their full support.
Jamie, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with Everett on that 100%. I think that, you know, Jones puts himself way out on a limb with a lot of things, and I think controversial is a good attribute to put upon him. I think that he does, his style is very out there, and he's definitely not orthodox. And I think that most people are not going to attach themselves or align themselves outwardly so closely with him. But like Everett said, I think he is somebody they want out there, but they're not going to really be seen to back him up, which, you know, I completely understand that 100%. But that's where I think you have to kind of parse the issue and say it's not really about Jones. It's not whether you like him or not, because, listen, it doesn't matter if he's left or right. I mean, if we allow these kind of things to happen as a society, where we can just shut people down or shut one side down or something, that's just a slippery slope. It really is. It's just a slippery slope. It's like, in my opinion, shutting down any kind of speech. That's why I don't even like the term hate speech. I don't like that. I don't like hate speech, if we want to give that a definition. Don't get me wrong. But I don't like labeling and parsing out segments of society and say, well, you can be heard and you can't be heard, and you know, once we start down that road, even with good intentions, once we start down that road, it's just a slippery slope, and it's just a matter of time before that becomes acceptable to do. And I just don't, you know, I've never ever been supportive of shutting people down or not letting people have the right to say whatever it is that they want to say, as long as you're not attacking someone. Say what you want to say, even if it's offensive. I mean, as far as I understand it, the way I've always read it, the First Amendment is not about protecting popular speech. The First Amendment is there to protect unpopular speech. Popular speech doesn't need protecting. You know, you should be able to be that one voice that has the thought that you have and be able to express that. And everybody else has the right to say, I don't like what you're saying, I'm tuning out. I don't like what you're saying, I'm going home. That's the beauty of freedom. Say what you want. I have the right to agree or disagree with you. That's the way this game is played. That's the way freedom works. It's once you start down the road of telling people what they can say, and well, this is bad and this is good, and you can read this book, but you can't read that book, and you can publish this, but you can't. We don't. That's what freedom in the United States and the Constitution. That's what all these things are about. You know, that's what they're about. So for me, it's not even about Alex Jones per se. It's about I think that more people should be on board supporting this situation, because it sets a very bad precedence.
Dave, I have a question for Michael, if I could quickly. Michael, we were talking a little bit about class action lawsuits and the possibilities of different actions taking place. Zuckerberg was called in front of Congress, and then after that, for a while there, Facebook was running those ads on TV where they were talking about they heard the people and they were going to get rid of the fake news and they were going to essentially clean up Facebook. So they take off Alex Jones, they take off others, and if you look at some of the stuff they've cleaned up, it does go sort of both ways, but obviously Alex Jones is the figurehead in this whole thing. how much of a defense can they argue that they were doing what the people asked? They, granted, Alex Jones is the big figurehead in this. They did take out other, let's call them minor players on both sides of the spectrum. Is that any defense if a suit were brought?
Well, yeah, that's exactly what a defense lawyer would be bringing out big time, is that, hey, we heard the message from Congress, and so we were just doing what we thought would be appropriate in that regard. There's another way of thinking about this whole idea as well, because I like Jamie's idea of the slippery slope here. What if this whole idea of jumping on Alex Jones is kind of a trial balloon that they're sending up to figure out how slippery is the slope? In other words, we're going to go after the left winger, and we're going to really make him an example of what we want to do here in this regard, and we want to see if there's any blowback. That might be the trial balloon here to figure out how slippery can they make the slope, and how fast can they put the controls on us if they want to. So who knows what the agenda is behind the scenes? But I agree with Everett that would be one of the defense approaches that they would bring to a trial if there was a class action lawsuit.
Gentlemen, I want to say we got about 5 minutes left in this highly controversial conversation we are having tonight on the Rebel Planet with Jamie Sexton. And Jamie, I want to get to your words in here, and then Michael's. No offense, Everett, we're going to bump you until the news here. Do you see a lawsuit happening here? Do you see Alex Jones being able to afford the lawyers and the court fees to maybe take on these social media companies and their unlimited budgets to try and bring in or bring out to the public some sort of collusion here?
I really don't know. It'd be very hard to challenge them on that. But I would like to address what Everett said. When Zuckerberg was before Congress, the mandate there wasn't about fake news. That was just a side agenda that Zuckerberg threw in there. Zuckerberg was actually in front of Congress about discriminating, about filtering, about spying on people, and about being selective. And when people use the term fake news, and I don't care if they're talking about Alex Jones or CNN, it's fine if you want to utter that rhetoric. But when it comes down to taking action against someone, who's to say what's fake news? I mean, my good friend Dave here runs a paranormal show every night. And if we start defining what's fake news, what are we going to do when we start saying, well, Bigfoot's fake or aliens are fake, and then he gets shut down because he's not allowed to talk about what's fake or what someone else deems as fake? I don't agree with that path of thought at all. I think that, again, it goes to the principle of saying whatever you want to say. And I do agree that Facebook has the right to say that. And I don't even think they should be sued, to be perfectly honest with you, unless it comes down to a bigger picture class action thing and they start using this as a precedent and they start affecting people's lives and their businesses and things like that. And it may well be that it is a balloon, as Michael suggests. This could be the canary in the coal mine. If they decide they can do this to Jones and get away with it, then we're all in trouble. We really are, and that's the bigger picture for me.
Michael W. Hall, I'm going to give you the final word on this. Do you see any type of class action lawsuit being taken up by Jones, or maybe a plethora of different groups and people here who feel they've been wronged by social media in regards to the way they've been banned? Could this go to court, or is it just way too expensive?
Yeah, I can't imagine that Alex Jones could marshal enough resources to actually fight the behemoths out there of the social media platforms at this point. I think he's using this opportunity in exactly how Alex Jones uses any opportunity to bring more publicity. You know, it's the old Hollywood adage in the old days is that, hey, any publicity is good publicity. And I'm sure he's going to twist this and use it to his best, advantage in the long run. But to bring a lawsuit would be he probably realizes that it would be not productive.
Jamie Sexton, thank you so much for being on Spaced Out Radio once again. Your next
Thank you, guys.
Your next date with us will be Thursday, September 20th, which is going to be really, really cool. Looking forward to having that. Michael W. Hall, thank you so much for joining us for some legal insight on this. And Everett Themer, we're going to get to you here with the encounter right now.
This is the winter of our lives. We come to play the final scene. The curtains closing in the darkness. We expose what lies beneath.
We are entering the encounter tonight with Everett Themer as we take a look around the world at the news of the day, the weird, the strange, the WTF. The news is always changing, and that's why we bring you the encounter. You can find the encounter right now for the time being on our Facebook page. Go to facebook.com/SOR the encounter. Give it a like if you do not mind. We got some great articles on there, especially a couple from one of our intrepid writers, Gail Shirk, and her stories on the Alex Jones situation, which we were just talking about with Jamie, Mike, and Everett. Everett Themer, welcome back on your regular section here on the show.
Wow, that was a fun show to listen to.
It really was. It really was. Lots of good debate, lots of good topics, and we still have Jamie Sexton and Michael W. Hall with us, so they could chime in on the news as well. Everett, lead it off, man. You're the leadoff batter here. Give us a good single to kick things off.
Well, there's quite a heat wave going on down in Colombia. So Julio Salas, he's a health minister for the town of Santa Marta. He suggested to the residents there that during the heat wave, they abstain from sex as a way to stay cool. And if they couldn't quit the activity, they should at least do it in the evenings and overnight when it was cooler out. Unless, of course, they had air conditioning. Then they could do it whenever.
That seems important in order to cool down the atmosphere, because all of the sex that is probably happening down there is just bringing global warming up to a scorching temperature.
Well, this was in an effort to prevent heat stroke. It's a rather popular tourist area, and the hospitals down there were experiencing quite a rise in reports of hospital visits regarding heat stroke and heat exhaustion. So,
I never thought about it that way. I never thought about it that way. I mean, let's get our panel in here. Jamie, I know you don't have much experience with topics like these, but what do you think? If you and your more beautiful half were on vacation, would you heed to those types of rules?
No, I'd probably be finding the quickest exit out of there.
Michael, how about you?
Yeah, I can see this as really a public safety issue here for the local gendarmes and government officials. I can imagine someone sitting around the boardroom saying, well, what are we going to do with our hospital being overwhelmed with heat stroke victims? And someone coming up with a brilliant idea. Well, I know, we'll make an announcement.
Hey, if I'm going to get heat stroke, that's how I want to get it.
Well, I understand that. I mean, but how hot is it down there right now? Are we talking 100+ degrees Fahrenheit?
They're about 30 degrees Celsius. So that would be what? About right around 90 degrees?
No, that's like 84.
Under what?
That's like 84 degrees, 30 degrees Celsius.
84?
Yeah.
Maybe there's an ulterior motive here for the powers that be to try to keep people from having sex. Maybe that's what's really behind this whole thing.
Pardon me, it's 86 degrees.
Hey, I'll tell you what. I lived in Vegas where it gets up to 127. It never stopped me.
Oh, in Vegas, they're always trying to stop people, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah, always.
Vegas has nothing to do with fun. Nothing to do with fun whatsoever.
Not at all.
No.
Yeah, but Vegas probably has a lot more air conditioning than Santa Marta, Colombia.
That's a good point. I think they might have invented it. At least that's what the commercial says.
You never know.
I mean,
you absolutely never know.
In all honesty, I mean, we can make light of it, but he did make this statement with the best of intentions. It is an ongoing problem down there right now. Some of it is, it is a tourist area. Some of it is the locals, but I'm surprised that they would consider those kinds of temperatures a heat wave in Colombia. I always pictured Colombia, on a cool day at 90.
That's what I would think too.
Yeah, 85 doesn't, if that's correct, it's not bad.
Yeah, I Googled it. It's 86 degrees Fahrenheit, 30 degrees Celsius.
That's not a heat wave.
No,
I agree.
Yeah.
I fully agree. I mean, maybe there's another term to this. Maybe the tourists were getting a little bit too randy in public, and that's their way of kind of shutting things down during the daytime around the beaches or the parks or any tourist attraction. Maybe that's the reason why.
Are you saying Colombia is trying to clean up its image?
Well, I mean, you can only go on the cocaine reputation for so long, right?
Come to Colombia, the family spot.
The family vacation, yeah. It's like saying, come to Vegas.
Oh, I hear you. I hear you. Everett, let's go on to story number 2.
There is a new vodka on the market. It's called Evil Spirits Distillery, and they've released this vodka. It's a small batch vodka that has a Ouija board on the label, and it comes with a planchette. So, as their tagline says, you will never drink alone. And what I thought was really cool about this stuff, I guess maybe cool isn't the word, but they mellow it with stones from Dracula's castle.
See, the one thing I like about this vodka is it is made in Vancouver. So I got to try and find a bottle of this. Honestly, this weekend I'm going to try and go to the liquor store and see if I can find a bottle of this, because I actually want one for the studio, just to put it in there. But I mean, on the flip side, though, guys, and I'm curious your opinion in regards to this, mixing alcohol with anything that could come out of a Ouija board or a spirit board may not be the best combination that you do. It's kind of like drinking and driving on the spiritual side. And I honestly wouldn't recommend anybody buying this to actually use it or to have a drink and use the planchette and the Ouija board at the same time. I mean, are we dealing with the vodka devil here?
You know, when I first saw the story, I thought that was really cool. And then I kind of thought about it a little bit. And, this seems like it could potentially be aimed at a market of not quite underage drinkers, but that, let's say, 19 to 24-year-old crowd that might want to grab some vodka and go out in the cemetery and try and communicate with something. And I think that for somebody that young or really anybody, that could potentially be a little dangerous, not just paranormally, but just the idea of creating that situation or that environment to be drinking it.
Kind of a trendy novelty thing is what they're, yeah.
Oh, I think it's brilliant. I think it will sell huge to the paranormal crowd. But Michael, you've been around the paranormal world a long time here. Are we dealing with some potential danger here with alcohol, a Ouija board, and people not knowing what they may conjure up?
Yeah, they don't call me the paranormal lawyer for nothing. So this is something that I would definitely jump on here right away as far as trying to tell people, the Ouija boards are dangerous enough as it is. It's like, driving a 1965 Mustang convertible. You can't just really go slow on those kind of things. It's almost like you've got to test the speed limit for sure. And when you're talking about, I'm looking at the bottle right now. It's just very ingeniously created with the Ouija board symbols right on the label. And, of course, the planchette is there coming, almost look like a guitar pick, and you could actually use that right on the bottle to conjure up, spirits or, different kinds of messages. And I'm thinking, you don't want to be messing with a Ouija board, even if you're not drunk. But if you are, who knows what you're opening yourself up to? Let's put it that way.
Do you guys think though that maybe the marketing of products like this, not specifically, but definitely aimed at that paranormal crowd, is beginning to wane or get a little old? I mean, there are so many different alcohol products out there that have, whether it be a ghosty sounding name or artwork or imagery that definitely hints at some form of paranormal. At what point does it just become blasé to the paranormal crowd?
Oh, I think the paranormal crowd is going to eat this right up, man. I think they will eat this right up. I think they are on something. No pun intended. But but I mean, honestly, I'm looking at the website right now, and from a marketing standpoint, here I am thinking, do I contact these people about a potential sponsorship for the show because we could help each other out? I mean, I don't know how that would work on terrestrial radio. I got to talk to my people about that. But I mean, on the flip side, it's a gorgeous bottle. A lot of people, I think this is going to be a hot seller. I got to find
even
one.
at $50, what is it? $50, $51 Canadian per bottle.
So I was like, yeah, I would totally pick one up. I totally would pick one up.
I don't know if I could open it. If I'm going to spend $50 on a bottle of vodka, I don't know if that could do anything other than be displayed on the bookshelf.
I just cracked a $110 bottle of tequila that was given to me as a present a couple of weeks ago.
I stay away from tequila, but tell me how it was.
Oh, it was fantastic.
Did it taste good?
It was fantastic. Actually, the reason why I cracked it open was neighbor Tony, who helped with the forest fires. He was a volunteer firefighter last year. I promised him that we would crack it open, and with the way things have been going and taken off with this show, combined with him moving and the fires last year, because he really kept me up to date on my house and keeping my nerves down during that ugly situation last year with the forest fires, that I figured there was no time like the present than to crack that bottle open, and that's what we did. And it was good. It was
nice.
Good.
I'm with Everett. The more you drink enough tequila, you don't need a Ouija board to see spirits.
No, that is very, very true. But I mean, this is something that I would look to see if they would be interested in partnering up. But I got to talk to my people and see if that's even legal, considering the commercial time, right? So
I'm curious how they got the stones from Dracula's castle to Vancouver. Is that legal? I don't know.
That's a good question.
Yeah, getting that through customs.
What's
that
the
would
name
be
of this
interesting.
product?
Yeah. Well, it says
what's
here
the name of the product?
They are
It's
limited.
Evil Spirits Distillery.
It says they are limited release availability in Canada only in the following provinces: BC, Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Ontario.
So what you're saying is you're going to buy a bottle for me and send it.
Oh, I got to figure this out. I got to.
I think this is going to give Dan Aykroyd's Crystal Head vodka a run for their money on this one. Have you ever seen Dan Aykroyd's version of the vodka bottle?
I actually got served by Dan Aykroyd at the Roxy in Vancouver when he brought that out on a tour of Vancouver bars.
Nice.
So I got it straight from the man's hands.
Oh, that's wonderful. I think he's an interesting, great actor, and of course he's into the paranormal big time. So it's kind of interesting that you met him up there.
Yeah, didn't get a real chance to talk to him, but nonetheless, I tried the vodka.
I think the idea of Dan Aykroyd creating a vodka that's kind of geared towards the paranormal is much more interesting than somebody just creating one. And we can't say that this is for marketing purposes, but how different is it really from a standard vodka, whether you go the Smirnoff or Absolute or even like Belvedere or Grey Goose? How different is it? I think we need to find out.
Yeah. Matter of fact, Bill Murray as well has his own vodka, Slovenia. So who knows which is the best, or maybe we should have a taste test and give a report.
I don't know. After 9 or 10 shots, they all start to taste the same.
Very interesting. Everett, I think we got time for one or two more stories here.
Okay, well, we've talked a lot about the wildfires in BC and California and around that area. Well, I think one of the things that we kind of overlook are some of the dangers. We talk about the fire crews that face the danger every day, but there was a forestry crew that was walking a cut line out in a forest or a fire ravaged area, and they were basically trapped by a cougar and had to call the fire crews for help. They made their way back to their truck, but they had to basically escape a cougar out in the woods. And I think we go ahead.
I think that happened in Karameas, which is a small orchard-like town in British Columbia here. And I'll tell you guys, when the forest fires happen, it doesn't matter whether you're here, you're in California, or wherever it's heavily wooded, the animals don't know where to go. And you have to feel for the animals because they're just as petrified as we are. They don't know what these weird-looking humans are doing out in the forest. They don't know a forest firefighter from somebody who's backpacking, or maybe the animal is hungry. So knowing the amount of cougars that are in British Columbia, or mountain lions, pumas, whatever you want to call them, this doesn't really surprise me that this incident's happened. And actually, I'm surprised it doesn't happen more because there's some big cats out here, man. Big cats. And they go 200 to 300 pounds.
You know, what's weird is this is the third or fourth story like this that I've seen in the past few days. And I'm guessing that's because the fires are ravaging on, but I've seen several stories of whether it be bears or mountain lions or cougars, people trapped in their trucks, people, these animals essentially, whether it be stalking them or searching, looking at them for food or trying to get away. But there have been several stories now of people experiencing attacks like this. And I think it's something that we kind of overlook in these topics when we're talking about the dangers of wildfires.
I think it's, I think it's, like I said, I'm surprised it doesn't happen more. I know up here in BC, in certain remote or more remote areas, they'll even tell you that if you're going into the forest, to bring a Halloween mask, one with that rubber band, that thin rubber band that kind of allows you to stretch the mask over top of your face, and they actually tell you to wear that mask in reverse because cougars like to attack from behind. So if they're coming up behind you and they see a face, the likelihood of being attacked, unless the animal is seriously hungry or just a disturbed animal, that it will help in protection. So a lot of people do that, and I know the forestry workers out here, when they get dropped off into a remote area where they're going to cordon off an area where they're going to log, they either do that or they carry a gun with them, because when they're being tracked down by a cougar, it's just them and the helicopter that's about to pick them up in that certain area. I mean, it can be scary out there.
I imagine. And when you told me that, I kind of snickered a little bit. But with Halloween coming up, recently I found out that there are cougars migrating into an area a little bit north of here, and there's actually a wildlife alert and warning out. So this Halloween, as crazy as it sounds, I think I'm going to buy a couple of masks just to keep around. And hopefully you're right, because I don't want to be cat food.
No. Jamie, do you guys get the big cats down there in Texas?
We sure do. Well, I had a tiger, but that's a different story. Yeah, we do. We have pumas and mountain lions. I've run across them before hunting late at night, and you're right. If you can make eye contact with them, they'll look at you real leery, but they won't. They generally won't attack. They're as scared of you as you are of them. But in a fire situation, if they're cornered, that's not a good situation. I can't imagine being in a raging fire and the way you die is not the fire, but get eaten by a big cat. That'd be horrible. Or a bear.
Yeah, no kidding. And Michael W. Hall, you being in Washington State, I know there's a lot of big cats around there as well.
Well, yeah. And, bear, just like you've got up there as well. So, I think that's really a genius idea about wearing any kind of a mask backwards. As David Paulides will tell you, the 411 Missing book series, you don't want to be the first or the last one in line as you're walking through the forest on a trail. So I would think that if you were in a situation like that, having a Halloween mask on your head backwards might help with either whatever is out there abducting people and or big cats or bears as well, and even Bigfoot. Who knows?
You never know. I can say this because we got to get to the thought of the Dave here. But I can say this, as someone who has a little guy and lives in a wooded area where there are a lot of animals. We went on this greenbelt walk the other day because we were out hiding some geocaches, my buddy and I, and our sons are the same age. And, the kids would be running, 25, 30 feet ahead, and you got to call them back. The little kids, they don't know. But it takes seconds, those split seconds for an animal like a bear or a cougar to just be, hiding, waiting for small prey. And before you know it and before you blink, there's one of the children with, in the mouth of the cougar. I mean, it has happened. It's happened to adults. It's happened to kids. And you have to be careful. And unfortunately, a lot of people are not wild animal aware when they are in wild animal territory. And I think we can all agree that if you're going out in the wilderness, figure out what animals are out there and prepare for them just in case. Get some bear bangers, get some masks, pepper spray, whatever it is. If you're allowed to carry a gun, because you just never know. You never know, and safety comes first, definitely. Let's get to the thought of the Dave. Thought of the Dave happens every night at this time, where we ask you a question on our Facebook and Twitter, and then we read your responses because we love the audience participation around here. So the more you participate, the more chance you have of your comment being read on the air, and we absolutely love it. So today's thought of the Dave is as follows. Are social media platforms overstepping free speech? Now, as we discussed with Jamie and Michael and Everett, these companies, these media companies, social media companies, they're private corporations. They're allowed to set rules on what people can and cannot say. I think we can all agree on that. However, there's a lot of people out there who tend to look at these as public corporations that they can say what they want when they want because their wall is their wall. So we had a number of comments on this, and these are the responses. David says, no, there is no free speech on Facebook, just leftist talking points. Now, Chris states social media are businesses, and so no. So just like we were talking with the panel today. Neil, I'm banned for posts removed. In fact, my posts aren't even getting to my followers. Kevin states, social media platforms have not been shown to be inherently biased towards the pro or con side of free speech. However, individuals and representatives of special interest groups will oftentimes try to stifle or disparage the speech of others once they have saturated the community with their message. Heidi jumps in. There's only free speech if you stand outside in the middle of nowhere and shout at the trees. On social media, you are playing in someone's sandpit. It's their rules. There is no free speech on social media. Jason says no. James doesn't agree. He says absolutely. Say what you want. Nigel, yeah, there's free speech. Gail hops in and says, no, they aren't. You come to my house, you abide by my rules. You want to violate those rules? I'll show you the door. And that's pretty much what these social media platforms are doing. Kat says, no, people need to learn that though that free speech is mostly about press and the group's opinion not getting muffled by government agencies and doesn't really apply on a person-to-person basis. Amendment 1, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Coral jumps in. Yep, free speech is one of the freedoms we should all be allowed to practice. As a listener, I have the right to turn it off if I don't like the content. If one particular group wants to play nasty and pull person or persons off their corporate-sponsored site, then that, to me, is tyranny. And we're going to give the final word to Corinth. Free speech only applies to government and its limitations of what it can tell you that you can or cannot say. Free speech does not apply to private companies. He goes on to say Facebook is a private sector company and is not ran by the government, therefore they can limit any speech they want. Kind of a crappy reality we are in. Jamie Sexton, thank you so much for coming on Spaced Out Radio tonight. We will talk to you on Thursday, September 20th.
Yes, sir. Thank you. It was good to be here.
Absolutely. Everett Thiemer, where can people find The Encounter?
They can find The Encounter at facebook.com/SOR The Encounter Online.
All right. And our paranormal lawyer, Michael W. Hall, thank you for hopping on in and bringing the legal side to this very debatable conversation.
My pleasure. This was a great show.
All right, you guys hold on. We're going to wrap this up. Tomorrow night on the program, Naomi West joins us to discuss the unusual supernatural phenomena of time slips. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern at spacedoutradio.com. Don't forget, after this show, go to questers.ca. questers.ca. Click on Fall Conference. Get your tickets right now for the first annual Caribou Paracon presented by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. That event runs September 28th through 30th at the Spruce Hill Resort and Spa up here in 108 Mile Ranch, BC. We want to see you there. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Thank you to everybody listening in at home, in your cars, at work, wherever you may be. Special thank you to everybody on Twitter at hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Great snark in there tonight, boys and girls. Everyone on Spreaker and the SOR Space Travelers Club on Facebook. You were fantastic with your comments. Thanks for sharing the show and telling your friends, doing your part to make us bigger and better every single night. Because together, my friends, we own the night. I will talk to you in 21 hours from now. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Good night.